Bob, thank you for joining us. Go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Brenda, you and I have known each other now for more than 20 years. Can you believe it? I value our friendship and our professional connection, and also appreciate the multiple times that you have engaged me to speak before the Chesapeake chapter of APMP. I'm honored to be here today to talk about both understanding and high confidence in the context of federal government proposals. Far too many times, federal contractors try to address understanding the requirement in a request for proposal or RFP by taking one of several suboptimal approaches. The government requires. This is one of the most common approaches, but it totally misses the mark. For example, I've read the Center for Biomedical Informatics and Information Technology requires a partner capable of providing a stable storage and data protection/backup environment while taking a proof of value approach to drive the shift to cloud storage to provide more scalability and resiliency. That doesn't share anything in terms of your company's understanding. It just simply parrots back what's in the performance work statement or perhaps in the statement of work, depending on the type of procurement it is and what it's called. Paraphrasing the performance work statement or statement of work, I have seen going back as far as 15 years ago in a solicitation from NASA headquarters, Office of the Chief Information Officer, that the government stipulated, quote, paraphrasing the specifications are inadequate. This same solicitation also indicated that phrases such as standard procedures will be employed and well-known techniques will be used are also inadequate. And yet I still see these techniques in use today in 2026. Exact quoting of the solicitation document. Now that's actually the worst approach that I've seen. All it shows the government is that your company can, in fact, read. I have literally seen this in a proposal. The Defense Logistics Agency at New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, issued a Network Infrastructure Support Services request for proposal to upgrade and install the network infrastructure for the Defense Logistics Agency information operations at 10 mandatory and 4 optional distribution locations nationwide. You see, that just doesn't demonstrate that your company understands anything other than you can literally read from the solicitation. So adding that kind of information is certainly wide of the mark. Lack of demonstrated understanding of the government customer's operational environment and cadence, the government's challenges, strategic framework, technology roadmaps, business goals, objectives, and overall mission is one of the top 2 non-price related reasons why both large and small companies lose federal government competitive proposals. I was engaged by a global Fortune 500 company to perform an end-to-end review of a series of detailed annotated proposal outlines. This was part of their pursuit of a multi-billion-dollar Air Force contract in the Western United States. These annotated outlines had been crafted and populated by a team of highly competent and dedicated professionals in their respective areas of expertise. What I observed throughout the outlines across the three major sections that I reviewed was a definitive lack of understanding. This despite the fact that the draft Section L instructions to offers stated explicitly that, quote, the technical approach / technical risk factor focuses on the offer's approach to effectively and efficiently accomplish the requirements of this contract, thereby demonstrating understanding of those requirements. Now, another example of understanding from Section L comes from a 2023 NASA enterprise-wide solicitation. Quote, demonstrate an understanding of the overall and specific requirements of the proposed contract. For the video oral presentation, Section L in that case stipulated that the offer shall provide a discussion that demonstrates a thorough understanding of the technology and also demonstrates an understanding of delivering software development using fixed capacity teams. Section M, the evaluation factors for award, documented that the video presentation, quote, will be evaluated for overall demonstrated comprehensive understanding. Clearly, understanding constitutes a critical requirement and dimension of evaluation for the U.S. federal government. Now, one way to illustrate understanding is through a relationship diagram, as you see here, that shows how individual tasks in the performance work statement connect with each other. For example, task 1 at the bottom, program management, and infrastructure delivery are cross-cutting tasks. Task 13, database services, contributes to task 2. Task 13 is in the lower left, task 2 in the cylinder in the center. And task 13 also contributes to task 3, Windows services, which is above the cylinder at the bottom. The point is that you can take the tasks that are presented within the solicitation document and build a graphical depiction of how those tasks relate to one another. That's a very effective way of conveying understanding without ever using the words, we understand. Now, another meaningful way that you can convey understanding without using the expression we understand or we recognize is to construct a stakeholder map, or cube. Cube is the terminology now used in the project management body of knowledge 8th edition. For the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation Failed Bank Data System, or FBDS proposal, I built this 4-part diagram that captured governance and drivers, IT interfaces, stakeholders, and users of failed bank data based on research. Now, technical subject matter experts came behind me and vetted this for accuracy and completeness. The notable outcome was that a significant amount of insight, that is, understanding, was conveyed in a concise graphic. So what you want to do is focus on the why behind the work that the government needs to have done. That's what demonstrates understanding. For example, if a given agency wants an agent-ready AI native database platform with core relational fundamentals. Discuss the business value of this platform, such as reduced operational and IT costs, along with reduced security risks. Again, focus on the why. Acknowledge the agency's current or as is state, as well as the intended, desired, or to be state to meet future goals. Show that your company understands the specific agency's culture, its existing legacy systems, or regulatory constraints, such as NIST standards or FedRAMP compliance. Now, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO, issues legal decisions on bid protests, which occur when a party believes that a federal agency violated procurement laws during a contract award or solicitation. Now, it turns out that these decisions are, or should be, absolutely invaluable sources of information to industry about the source selection and proposaling processes. In many cases, very clear definitions are provided for elements that do not appear directly in a given agency's solicitation documents, such as a strength for a Department of Justice procurement. DOJ does not define the word strength, and I've worked on one as recently as last month where they do not define the word strength, whereas GAO in their protest decision documents, I was able to find a definition of strength as applicable to the Department of Justice. Now, one important way to convey your company's understanding is to show how your company can use a design thinking framework to tackle challenging issues that a specific government agency faces. The benefits of design thinking include improved and creative problem solving, stronger collaboration, cost savings, faster decision making, and better user outcomes. You'll want to ask and answer the question, what particular federal mandates and agency-specific policies, directives, and procedures are related to the governance of the tasks associated with a given procurement? Let's examine the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, which has been in the news recently, of course, with its Artemis II flyby of the moon. We'll begin with the landmark NASA Authorization Act of 2026, legislation passed by the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation just back on March 4th. This provides the guidance needed to maintain American leadership in aeronautics, space exploration, Earth and space science, and space technology development. Now, this overarching legislation drives the mission of the entire agency. Underneath that legislation are NASA policy directives, or NPDs. These documents establish the high-level policies of the agency. Next are the NASA procedural requirements, or NPRs, which provide the detailed mandatory instructions and how-to steps required to implement the policies set forth in the policy directives. Now, NASA has 10 major field centers across the United States. In fact, I've had the good fortune of being able to visit 6 of them. And those individual NASA centers can issue their own center policy directives and center procedural requirements. Demonstrating your company's awareness and knowledge of this governance framework and how it drives the requirements associated with a specific NASA procurement is invaluable to establishing a meaningful level of understanding. Similarly, the U.S. Department of Energy operates under a hierarchical structure of governance that translates federal law into specific operational requirements. Now, as of April of 2026, the Department of Energy is heavily influenced by recent executive orders aimed at, quote, unleashing energy dominance and streamlining regulatory processes. The DOE's foundation is built upon several key congressional acts or statutes. They include the Department of Energy Organization Act, the Energy Policy Act, the Atomic Energy Act, and the Energy Policy and Conservation Act. Recent executive orders have pivoted the department toward deregulation and domestic resource expansion. For example, Executive Order 14301, signed in 2025, focuses on a nuclear renaissance by streamlining national laboratory processes for reactor testing. And the Reliability and Security Order, Executive Order signed in 2025, which directs the Secretary of Energy, Mr. Chris Wright, to expedite processes for grid operators to prevent interruptions and safeguard the electric grid. Directives are the Department of Energy's primary internal method for setting mandatory requirements for its employees and contractors. So we'll want to be familiar with those principal directives. Now, underneath directives, there's orders that are authoritative instructions that must be followed. For example, DOE Order 413.3b governs the management of capital acquisition projects. Underneath orders are policies. Those are broad statements of the Department of Energy's position on specific topics, such as information technology. And finally, manuals. They provide more detailed technical instructions on how to implement specific orders. Building a graphic that reflects this governance structure and how it aligns with the tasks of a specific solicitation goes a long way to demonstrating that your company brings genuine understanding to this program. Now, in a solicitation released just last month by the Department of Justice, these exact words appeared in the solicitation, specifically in the performance work statement. Maintaining the best interest of the government and the taxpayer. Now, this was absolutely no surprise to me. Importantly, the terms from Project 2025 have now found their way into RFPs. In my detailed assessment of the 887 pages of the Project 2025 document, using a government acquisition lens rather than a political one, I wasn't interested in the politics. I was only focused in on federal acquisition terminology and best practices that were identified in Project 2025. I found that there was extensive use of financially focused key terminology. Clearly, every federal program going forward will have to demonstrate economic value to the American taxpayer and to the U.S. government. Contractors supporting these programs will have to ensure that there is a high degree of transparency insofar as cost. For example, companies should keep detailed records of all direct and indirect expenses related to a given contract. In addition, businesses should conduct internal audits and ongoing compliance testing to ensure that their subcontractors also align with the prime contract's transparent cost standards. And from a practical standpoint, leverage the GAO's cost estimating and assessment guide, Best Practices for Developing and Managing Program Costs, which, in order to find it, is document GAO-20-195G, as in golf. But you would be well served as an organization in each one of the companies that you support. You would be well served to become very, very familiar with the acquisition-related language of Project 2025. And in fact, if you choose, you can email me and I will be glad to share with you my detailed analysis of the Project 2025 document. And again, specifically as it relates to acquisition-related terminology. Again, not political. But I'll be happy to do that. Now, federal contractors will be well served to build their awareness of the importance of the American taxpayer into both the understanding and approach sections of your proposals. And interestingly, fraud, waste, and abuse has risen in visibility and significance. For example, the March 16, 2026 Executive Order number 14395 established a task force to combat fraud, waste, and abuse. Now, this task force is headed by the Vice President and includes representatives from a variety of agencies: Department of Justice, Treasury, Housing and Urban Development, and the Department of Labor, as well as the Department of Veterans Affairs, Health and Human Services, and Agriculture. So clearly, fraud, waste, and abuse stands very prominent in the administration's thinking. Ensuring fiscal transparency and accountability should be integrated into your proposal responses. For example, in Department of War procurements, awareness and understanding of Secretary of War Hegseth's March 20, 2025 memorandum entitled Continuing Elimination of Wasteful Spending at the Department of War, having an understanding of that is essential. In general, you'll want to become conversant in several presidential executive orders. One that was signed on April 15th of 2025 called Restoring Common Sense to Federal Procurement, and an even more recent and highly relevant executive order, which was signed just on April 30th of 2026. It was entitled Promoting Efficiency, Accountability, and Performance in Federal Contracting. Now, whether the specific RFP uses these terms or not, my professional recommendation is that efficiency and accountability should stand as prominent elements in your company's federal proposal response. Now, you can think of efficiency as the ability to achieve a desired result or deliver a meaningful outcome while minimizing the use of resources such as time, energy, effort, or money. And insofar as accountability, your proposal should focus on outcomes in accordance with performance metrics. Now, you'll want to pay particular attention to the Quality Assurance Surveillance Plan, or QASP, the Performance Requirements Summary, or PRS, acceptable quality levels, or AQLs, and performance objectives, or POs. Too many times what I see is companies gloss over those elements of a solicitation. Those have to be tied into your understanding as well as your approach in your proposals in order to be evaluated in a positive manner, as with as many strengths as possible in the source selection decision document. And that's one thing I wanted to emphasize here as well, is that the government doesn't care about our themes. Yes, there I said it. The government doesn't care about industry's themes. The government cares about significant strengths as well as weaknesses and deficiencies. Our goal is to maximize the number of strengths and significant strengths found in source selection statements that relate to our company's proposal. And that is something I know that Bob Lofeld has been a huge proponent of as well, is strength-based proposing. In a $600 million Department of War procurement that unfolded between last October and January of 2026, the government indicated that in each element in the technical volume that they would be rated on a confidence scale, with high confidence being the best level. Now let's listen to the definition. The government has high confidence that the offerer understands the requirement, proposes a sound technical approach, possesses the ability to staff the requirement in a feasible and realistic way, and will be successful in performing the contract with little or no government intervention. My customer was awarded this contract in March of 2026, in part because during the oral presentation, evidence of high confidence, not just high confidence, but evidence of high confidence, was continuously reinforced with quantitative and qualitative detail. So understanding and high confidence stand squarely on the critical path to proposal success, and certainly in recent Department of War solicitation documents. I was down in Louisville, Kentucky in late April to support one of my customers on a multi-billion-dollar Department of Veterans Affairs proposal. I took the time to visit Churchill Downs, site of the Kentucky Derby, which was run just this past Saturday. Now that you're equipped to more fully address understanding the requirement in federal RFPs, go win more stuff. It's exhilarating to stand in the winner's circle. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bob. That was an outstanding presentation. And I have a couple of questions, and I actually encourage everybody else to put some questions in the chat too. And I thought you had such an interesting take on looking at what has come down from the current administration, mentioning taxpayer investments, economic value, financial transparency, and of course, fraud, waste, and abuse. And I was wondering if you could give the audience some practical examples of how you might use that either in an understanding or a technical approach.
Well, certainly from the, let's take fraud, waste, and abuse,
Mm-hmm.
building awareness of that into one's understanding and approach section is an important dimension to demonstrate that you're going to be, first of all, that you understand that that's important, And secondly, that you are going to provide concrete methodologies, tools, and techniques to address and increase the level of transparency that your approach will provide to the government. We need to move away from generalities when we talk about dollars and visibility into dollars and that type of thing. We need to talk in terms of, well, what specific approaches are we going to use? What tools, techniques, what processes, methodologies are we going to employ? In fact, that could be done in a graphic or in a text box to indicate, hey, we know that fraud, waste, and abuse are critical concerns to you, government agency. Here's what we're going to do to ensure that every dollar that we are engaged in supporting the government with, that every dollar we use is used with well-defined and described stewardship, that we can actually, if we can quantify it, that's even better. How we go about ensuring that every dollar is invested carefully and thoughtfully. But I really like to use graphics to show key elements, because versus a wall of words on a page, even a text box is welcome relief to an evaluator to pick up on what it is that you're offering that means something to the agency, and importantly to the administration as well.
Excellent examples. Thank you so much. David has a great question here. How does this apply to an OTA? And you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the other transaction authority types of procurements, which are part of the Department of War's streamlined acquisition directive and direction. I think that I've worked on both the OTAs and other elements within the Defense Innovation Unit to acquire things quickly for the warfighter. And one of the things that I always like to emphasize is to show how the dollars that are going to be spent on this particular program, how they're going to be leveraged and maximized to the benefit of the warfighters, always to the benefit of the warfighter, because that's what Department of War cares about, and that's their ultimate customer, so to speak. But using awareness of what's in Project 2025, what's in these various executive orders, what's in the specific agencies' mission directives, policies, and so forth, to mirror that in your proposal, whether it's for an OTA or some other vehicle. But it's important to reflect this new lexicon in our proposals. That things recently, I'd done a posting at LinkedIn that everything's connected. And the important thing to recognize is that government agencies do not exist in a vacuum. They are fitted within a legislative framework, a policy and procedure framework. It all fits within a comprehensive governance umbrella, and we need to make sure that we're reflecting that and our understanding of that when we prepare and submit our proposals.
I got one more question here, Bob. And if the FAR overhaul was substantial, and actually, I'm going to hold my question because David has a follow-up to his question. So just one moment, please. Is a ConOps graphic a good way to show relationships of the elements of a proposed solution, in your opinion?
Certainly, ConOps diagrams can be very instructive and convey a great deal of understanding, as long as the ConOps shows how the elements of the PWS connect together. It could be part of a ConOps diagram. Certainly, I've seen very useful ConOps diagrams, but it will need to make sure that we're including the specific tasks that appear in the PWS or statement of work to show how they connect, because that's really what we're trying to demonstrate. But the ConOps is really, I see, being more aligned with approach than understanding. I think that the some type of relationship diagram for understanding and a ConOps, certainly as part of approach, would be an important way of demonstrating that we clearly bring comprehension of what the governance framework is, and also that we're prepared to leverage that understanding and have that drive our approach to deliver value to that particular agency.
I'll get back to my question. Thank you so much, David. One last question from the group here. The FAR overhaul was immense. If you had one takeaway for proposal professionals after reading all of the changes it has gone through, or any piece of advice, what would you give them?
I would say be prepared to accelerate your proposal development processes, because the whole name of the game here is speed, and so I would say that as a proposal professional within an organization, that you'll want to ensure that you have processes and procedures and tools in place to develop proposals much more rapidly, not so much the 12 to 24 month timeframes anymore, much more condensed responses, and also more in the way of orals. I've seen that already being the case in specifically the Department of War. There's a much greater emphasis on oral presentations, and so therefore thinking more graphically in general, and then being able to put those graphics not only in the proposal but in the oral presentation slides would be a good thing. I know that to be sure, there have been significant changes, and all we can do is try to keep current with them. But I would think in general, those are some of the top level things to focus on.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. You are always brilliant, bring so much information. We'd like to thank you so much from APMP. You will be able to get a copy of the slides and the recording after this presentation. And please stay tuned for our next presentation in June, our webinar on orals. And also, one more thing, you can see Bob if you're going to APMP BPC Denver. He will be a panelist at the presentation entitled Ask the Fellows, and that is going to be on Thursday, May 14th from 3:45 to 5:45 in the Colorado Ballroom at BPC. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon, and we'll talk with you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, everyone. Brenda,
Bye-bye,
I
everybody.
will share my slides with you.
Whenever you have a chance. And Martha, you can draw the recording.
Thank you.